Hi everybody, I'm here with a video about hexes, curses, and negative type of baneful magic, and whether or not you should do it and what my thoughts are about that. Now, I know this is a complicated subject and one that people have a variety of opinions on. And so I welcome, any discussion in the comments as long as it's respectful. Everyone's got a different point of view. So I'm not here to tell people what their point of view should or shouldn't be. I'm just saying what my point of view is. And this is inspired by Ann Maddox did a video about her thoughts around hexes and curses. I encourage you to go watch it. It's very interesting discussion, and I think everybody's got like a slightly different point of view on it. So I think it's worth talking about like what exactly a curse and a hex is. So I kind of put them into different categories. So there's like curses, there's hexes, and then there's jinxes. And they're kind of in that realm of, they're in that general realm of baneful magic. But they're like different variations of severity. So to me, a curse is the most severe, and a curse is something where you are actively directing negative energy at, it could be like a person, it's usually at a person, but sometimes like it's even like whole like families, sometimes it's like a company, sometimes it's an institution, but usually directed at a person, and it affects like the whole of their life, or it affects like different areas of life. It is long term, it is big. You're basically kind of like punishing somebody by putting them, it's like, they've gotten a prison sentence of like life or 10 or 20 years, and this is what you're putting on them, this curse of like negative energy, and it's very big, like it encompasses like, a huge part of their life, and it's basically like you are wishing ill on somebody. It takes a lot of energy and a lot of power to do that, because if you are going to, send that much energy, that much negative energy towards someone, that takes a huge amount of hate, huge amount of negative, just angry energy. And so it takes a lot out of a person to do that. And so don't think curses are as common as what people think they are, but they are definitely like, I think like the most negative. Curses can be like as negative as like wishing death upon a person, but you're basically like, you are wanting to like mess that person's life up, or like a family line's life, or it's like severe, it's like hugely severe. And it's not like, a hex is a little bit different. A hex is also negative. And people use the word hex and curse interchangeably. But in my mind, a curse is like a really, like you're getting out the big bad guns. You are like getting out the bazooka, you're getting out the cannon. This is like the big thing. A hex is also severe, but not as severe as a curse. And so like Ann Maddox had kind of described it like a hex might affect like one particular area of a person's life or have a limited time on it. And I think that's a pretty good definition. But to me, a hex is like, it's not trying to like punish the whole of a person's life. It maybe is like in a very specific area, or it's for like a limited time. And so it is about something specific as well. Like it's like, because this person did this to me, I'm punishing them in this way. Like it has like a little bit more specificity to it, rather than being like a huge all-encompassing thing. I think also like hexes sometimes can be conditional in that I want this person to, have this happen, or have negativity in their life until they apologize, or until they do this, or until they fix this situation. So sometimes it has like a condition on it as well. So it's not as all encompassing as a curse, but it can have like just as much, effect. Like, so rather than like, like a curse would be like, like killing them or injuring them in some way. Maybe a hex might be where, it's something that, maybe they're sick for a while and then they get better. It's sort of like a metaphor if I was comparing them. And then we have jinxes, and jinxes are more about like, they are even smaller. Jinxes are more like you want someone to stub their toe, or it's like very instant, it's small, it's like a little like, you're snapping a little rubber band on someone's wrist, right? They're usually smaller. It's like a little bit of a hiccup in their life. It's not a big giant thing. So it's kind of like, I put like jinxes over here is small, and then hexes are kind of medium bad, and then you've got curses, which are the big bad. And that's how I think of it in my mind. mind. I do know that sometimes people use these things sort of interchangeably, but that's how I kind of categorize them in my mind. So to me, the umbrella of baneful magic doesn't just encompass curses, hexes, and jinxes. Baneful magic can also be used to describe things that are, things like binding or repelling, mirror spells where you're mirroring things back to people. And that's not necessarily like a bad thing, right? I think of it as more protective magic, even though to me they all fall under that kind of category. And so to me, acceptable ones to me are things like binding. Binding, and even with binding, I've only done binding a couple of times, and it was for something like very, very serious. Like, it's not something I would just throw out there for anybody. Binding is when somebody is doing something bad and you are trying to stop them from continuing to do that bad thing, continuing to harm others, continuing to harm themselves even. It is about stopping them from doing bad. So you're not wishing ill on the person, but you are wanting to stop them from harming or hurting others, or you're wanting them to get caught so that they can't hurt or harm others. So I think, to me, that is morally acceptable, because we don't want to we want to stop bad things from happening, right? Like, we don't want someone to continue to harm others or to bind others, right? Or to do bad things to other people. Other things can be banishing spells, where you want to remove someone or something from your life. So this can be a someone, this can be a habit, this can be an energy of some kind. Banishing it. It's kind of like, you wouldn't let somebody come into your house and like insult you or break things. You tell them to leave, right? And so that, I think banishing spells are also an acceptable form of magic, because we're like, no, I don't want this negative energy in my life. Or maybe it's a person. Maybe you have like a bad neighbor and you want them to like go away. Now, banishing spells, I think a really good way of doing a banishing spell on a person is like, you want them to go away from your life. You're not necessarily wishing anything bad upon the person. In fact, they may get like a better opportunity somewhere or a better house or something, but you are actively sending those people away so that they are not around you, or sending that energy away, or whatever it is, right? So I think banishing spells are also acceptable. Also acceptable to me are what I call mirroring spells. And so these are things where you are reflecting back. Like, if somebody's sending you negative energy, basically you're putting up a mirror so it bounces back at them. So you're protecting yourself, and it's kind of like you are sending it back you're sending that bad mail, that junk mail, back to the sender, right? Now, the good thing with mirroring spells is, let's say you think someone's sending negative energy towards you, or they're working against you in some way, and they're really not. The mirroring spell won't harm that person. If they're actually sending you good things, then good things are going to happen to them. If they're neutral, they're not doing anything, then nothing's going to happen. And so to me, that's also acceptable on a moral level, because you're not wishing ill towards someone. You're only sending back to somebody what they're sending to you. And again, that's something that I also take very seriously, because, I think that there is, you have to be careful with what you're doing. You don't see all things, right? And I think that's also important, whenever we're doing spell work, why it's important to do readings, because to do divination of some kind, because we don't see all things, right? But I do think that one, while I think it does kind of step a little bit in towards, being maybe a little morally gray at times, I think that it's acceptable, because if the person isn't sending negativity towards you, nothing's going to happen to them, right? And it's kind of like you're saying, like, hey, don't send negative stuff towards me if somebody is. And so to me, that is an acceptable kind of spell. So would I do a curse, a hex, or a jinx? And the answer to that so far has been no. I would never judge anybody, first of all, for doing that, because I don't know their circumstances. I don't know what's happened. I don't know why they're doing it. So this is not a judgment call on anybody that has. But I would say that that for me, at this particular point in my life, and that may change at some point, the answer to that is No, I wouldn't. I don't see anything wrong with protective magic. To me, protective magic is like locking your doors, putting security cameras up, like all of those things, right? Like we need to protect ourselves. We can't just throw the doors open and be like, hey, whatever. I also think things, like I said, like binding or banishing or mirror spells are fine too, because again, they're more protective in nature than they're trying to stop something bad from happening, than opposed to actively sending negative energy towards someone. I think that if you are thinking of doing like a curse or hex or jinx, really think to yourself, why am I doing this? I think it's important to examine that so that you're very clear about the reasons that you're doing this. I also think you should never do that when you're angry. Like you should never do that when you first find out about something bad. I think it's something that you have to step back from a little bit and think about what your motivation is for doing it. Because I do believe that the energy you put out in the world comes back to you in a certain way. And I think sometimes what happens is people have they have sort of like anger about things, and sometimes they end up projecting it towards certain people or taking out in the wrong way that they then later look back on and regret. So I think that it's important to examine, first of all, why you're doing that. Again, you may come to the conclusion that, yeah, no, this person or this thing or whatever deserves it, and that's fine. Like I'm not here to tell anybody what their morality should be. I'm just saying where I'm at, where mine is. And, an interesting thing that was brought up in Ann Maddox video is that she used to say she would never curse anyone, and then people would react with like, oh, well, it must be really nice that you've never had anything that bad happen to you where you felt you need to curse someone. And I can understand this reaction because people hear this, and sometimes that is, the message of sort of this more, what we used to call like fluffy bunny kind of love and light, and there's nothing wrong with that stuff either. I think it has its place for sure. But people feel like, oh, well, that's not very practical, or you must have not had anything terrible happen to you to say that. And I can say, if you've been on this channel and you know about like my life experience and everything, that is definitely not the case in my life. I have definitely had good reasons to curse or hex certain people. And if somebody else in similar circumstances said to me that they had cursed or hexed somebody that had done those same things, I would not blame them like at all, 100%. Like, I have experienced when I was younger, I experienced sexual assault. I had an abusive ex-husband who just terrible. Like he cheated on me. He was abusive. He went around telling lies about me. Like, if anybody deserved to be like cursed, I definitely, that was one I think where most people would have been like, oh yeah, I could see that for sure. And then two, if you've been on this channel, you know that the past couple of years have been a little bit difficult with, I've had, a couple of family members pass away. And then I also had, I think this is a really good example here. Earlier this year, I found out that an ex-boyfriend of mine had been murdered. And I think if anybody had said to me like, hey, I had, cursed my friend's murderers, I would be like, yeah, I understand. I completely get it. And it did cause me pause for thought about like, what do I want to do something magically about this? And I would never blame anybody for doing something like that, like magically about something, that serious or any of those other serious things, because again, I don't know what they've been through. But also there are parts of the world where, justice is not available to them. The law does not recognize those things, or they're in circumstances where people get away with that and there's corruption. And so sometimes people feel the only way that they can get justice is to curse someone, to do things like that. So I would never judge somebody for that. I think that, you can argue about, I live in a Western democracy. You can still argue about whether or not the system that we live in is just or not. However, the outcome of that particular case, both people did end up, they are in jail for a very significant amount of time. And so, I had thought about it. I don't think there's anything wrong doing spells asking for justice either, to be clear. I think that that is perfectly acceptable. But, what I had thought about is, in Stoicism, there's the idea of, was it Marcus Aurelius said that the best revenge is to be unlike the person who offended you. And I thought about that as well when it came to like to my ex-husband as well, is that, at first I was like, well, I don't go around murdering people, so, done, right? But when thinking about it a little deeper, I was also thinking about how I don't want somebody else's terrible behavior and the terrible thing that they did to dim my light or to change who the person I am. I don't want it to change me into somebody who is vengeful and angry and hates the world. And I feel like if I had sent that negative energy towards these people, that's part of making me into somebody that is more hateful and somebody who is more negative, and I did not want that. The other thing is I don't want any energetic connection to any of these people any more than what's already there. I don't want any energetic connection to them. So to me, when you send out a curse or a hex or even a little jinx to someone, you are creating an energetic connection with that other person. And you have to ask yourself, do I want that? Do I want that energetic connection with that person? Because you were actively sending, negative energy to someone. It's sort of like the difference between, like, if you are doing protective, workings, you're again locking the doors of your house and putting up security cameras and whatever. When you curse someone, that's like you went out with a gun and you shot them or you burnt their house down. And some curses can be that, they can be that serious, like really like strong ones. And you have to ask yourself, if you wouldn't go up to the person and do it in real life to them, then don't be sending that to them magically. Like, if you wouldn't go up to the person and like burn their house down, then don't do a spell to burn their house down. Like, if you're doing the spell, it's the same as if you walked up to the person and you slapped them, So you have to think, like, if I wouldn't go up and do this to the person in real life, then I shouldn't be doing it to them magically, because you're creating that same energetic connection. So my bigger thing with that situation was I don't want any energetic connection to these people. These are really, like, when I say they're really bad people, they're really bad people. They're like lifelong criminals. And to me, they curse themselves. Like, their lives are not good. Their lives are horrible. And so they curse themselves. And that's kind of the conclusion I came to as well with my ex-partner, is that this was someone that he's miserable. Like, he isn't a really angry, unhappy, lonely person, but he did that to himself. And so he cursed himself. Like, I don't have to curse him. He does it to himself, right? And that's how I think about that. There's, again, nothing wrong for asking for justice in things, but I think a curse is different. I think a hex is different. It is like you are taking it into your own hands and doing that. And I think that, again, I would never judge anybody. Like, anybody in any of the situations I've lived through said to me, I cursed that person, I would not judge them, because I get it. Like, I do. I completely and utterly understand. And some people just don't have, access justice available to them. So I would never judge them. I'm just saying this is why, like, I personally wouldn't do it. That may change. I don't know what the future holds for me. I don't know how I'm going to feel 5, 10, 15 years from now. I don't know how I'm going to feel about any of those things. I might entirely change my mind about it. But that's how I currently feel about it now, because I don't want those other people to change who I am. And I think that for me anyway, doing those kind of things to those people would, and I don't want that. So that's my thoughts on curses, hexes, and jinxes. But I want to know what your thoughts are. And again, as long as the discussion is, respectful, that is totally fine. I understand there are completely different points of view on this, and I totally get that. Also, what are your thoughts on doing things like mirroring or, banishing magic? Do you think that's under the same type of category? Do you find that, does that cross the line for you? Like, what are your thoughts about this? I would love to know. Again, as long as it's respectful, totally fine. Just as a little plug at the end here, thank you to my patrons. You guys are amazing and awesome. Patreon has kind of changed things. If you want to join my Patreon, check it out. If you want to join, I do weekly tarot scopes and weekly astrology reports. We also have a coven level, and right now we're also going through the Aleister Crowley Tarot, learning some thought. I was going to say don't join on if you're on an Apple phone, because it charges you more, and also like I get less of the money too. So go to a browser, go to like a laptop and join if you want to join. I also have an Etsy shop right now. I have a sale on year ahead readings. I have a year ahead astrology reading. I have a year ahead 12 house reading with God and Goddess cards. It's one of my most popular readings. And then I also have this year an angel reading for the year ahead, so if you want to check that out there too. Otherwise, just thank you for being here, and thank you for your comments, and thank you for supporting me. You guys are the best. You're awesome and amazing. And as always, peace and love and rock.